Okay, welcome back, everyone. We're gonna start on the second part to Big Paw. I had to make dinner and get everything set up and put away. And so I'm gonna try to put part 1 and 2 up tonight before I go to sleep. Um, I don't know if tomorrow I'll put up 3 and 4 or if we only do another part, which would be part 3. And then I'll put up some other books tomorrow as well so that there's a little bit of variety. So if you guys are all set and you're getting ready to go to bed, here we go, part 2. Chapter 6, A Cave with a View. Mountain goats were very much at home on the rocky ledge of Table Rock Mountain. The tough, sure-footed mountain goats made out fine on its high, narrow ledge. The mountain gave them everything they could want: grass and moss when they were hungry, ice and snow when they were thirsty, and a view money couldn't buy. And early one spring afternoon, it gave them the shock of their lives. When the sure-footed mountain goats saw Big Paw, they almost lost their footing. Goats' mouths fell open, goats' eyes wide open, goats' beards trembled. Up the mountain he came, and up the mountain he went. The great monster of the bear climbed the mountain as easily as a cub climbing a jungle gym. Up he went, and with his log banjo slung over his shoulder, he climbed until he came to a broad ledge just under Table Rock. A cave opened out onto the ledge. Big Paw looked into the cave. He had come a long ways. He was very tired. He slung his banjo. He stood on the ledge and looked out over the valley. It was a very beautiful afternoon, and the sun was shining. Big Paw stretched. As he stretched, he yawned. Just as Big Paw was mighty, so were his yawns. The echo through the valley sounded like thunder. Then Big Paw entered the cave and went to sleep. Chapter 7. Tell us more about the Big Paw, Professor. The rumble of Big Paw's yawn echoed across the valley. It reached the bear family's street party. It was refreshment time. Farmer Ben was in the food line with Actual Factual and the Bear Scouts. Ben looked up. Not a cloud in the sky, and we're getting thunder, he said. But it's kind of early for a thunderstorm. Wouldn't you say so, Professor? I'd say so, Ben, said the professor. Actual Factual. He knew better than to discuss weather with him. Being a farmer, Ben had strong opinions about it. You'd think Gran would have predicted something useful like the weather, said Ben, instead of this foolishness about Big Paw. Why's that story been kicking around for years, and he ain't never shown up yet? I'll take my pitchfork to him if he ever shows up around my place. The line had moved, and it was Farmer Ben's turn at the food table. He loaded his plate with goodies. When Actual Factual and the Scouts reached the food table, they did the same. They saw a good place to sit across the yard. It was a special bench that Papa had built around a big oak tree. Professor, said Scout Brother, when they were settled, would you tell us more about Big Paw? There's nothing to tell, said the professor. Big Paw is a myth. He doesn't exist. Let me explain. The professor took a pickle from his plate. See this pickle? It exists. It's real. He smelt the pickle. It has a smell. He took a bite of the pickle. It has a taste. It's delicious. Crunchy. He took another bite, and another, until the pickle was gone. So you see, he said, as he wiped his fingers on his napkin, the pickle is gone. It no longer exists. It is extinct. You mean, said Scout Fred, that there used to be a creature like the Big Paw, and now it's extinct? As it happens, my friend, you are exactly right. You see, said the professor, even the most far-fetched ideas are usually based on something. Where does the idea of Big Paw come from, said Scout Sister. From the giant prehistoric cave bear, said the professor, a creature that has been extinct for 9 million years. Wow, said Scout Brother. Gee, said Scout Fred. How about that, said Scout Lizzie. The Scouts fell silent. They were thinking about what a long time 9 million years was. This Big Paw, said Scout Brother. Was he big? Huge, said the professor. Where did he live, said Scout Sister. Before he got extinct, that is. The professor got a far-off look in his eyes. That's what's so strange about Gran's predictions, said the professor. He lived right around here. Chapter 8, A Treasure Beyond Price. The party hadn't been a success for Ralph Ripoff, Bear Country's leading crook and swindler. At least, not so far. Ralph was having a good enough time. He had passed the time of day with his great and good friend, Mayor Hortense J. Honeypot. Ralph's friendship with the mayor had come in handy before and would again. He had been charming to Lady Grizzlies. It was all he could do upon kissing her hand to keep from taking out his jeweler's glass and inspecting a diamond bracelet. Well, what a wonderful individual. But being on his good behavior was making Ralph nervous. There wasn't much he could do about it. The food was free and the balloons weren't worth stealing. Picking pockets was out of the question because Chief Bruno was watching him like a hawk. After a visit to the food table, Ralph noticed Actual Factual and the Bear Scouts sitting on the oak tree bench. They had their heads together as if they were talking about something really important. Why don't I join them, thought Ralph. I might hear something interesting. Ralph moved through the shadows and joined Actual Factual and the Scouts on the other side of the bench, of course. What Ralph heard was interesting beyond his wildest dreams. This is what he heard. Would they be valuable? Said Scout Brother in a hushed voice. You got his interest. Valuable? Said Actual Factual. They'd be a treasure beyond price. More precious than diamonds and gold. The find of the century. The words valuable, treasure, diamonds and gold, and find of the century rang in Ralph Ripoff's greedy ears like a glorious bell. The party hadn't been a failure after all. It had been a great success. Who needs to pick pockets when you can rip off a fabulous treasure of diamonds and gold? He had to find out where this treasure was hidden, of course. But that shouldn't be hard. Surely there was a map. Indeed, there was a map showing showing exactly where Actual Factual hoped to find the fossil remains of the giant prehistoric cave bear. That was the treasure the professor and the Bear Scouts had been talking about. It was all Ralph could do to keep from leaping up and kicking his heels together, but he sat quietly, hardly breathing until Actual Factual and the Scouts got up to leave. He listened hard for more about the treasure. All he heard was something about rock climbing and meeting behind the Berenstain the next morning. Chapter 9. X marks the spot. There's still something we don't understand, Professor, said Scout Brother. When the Bear Scouts arrived early that morning, the professor had all sorts of rock climbing gear laid out on the Berenstain parking lot. Learn how to pack bags. That's what that means. What's that? Said the professor. Well, said Scout Brother, we thought that the way to find fossils was to dig for them. That's usually the case, said the professor, but you said we're going fossil hunting in the mountains. Yes, on Table Rock Mountain to be exact, said the professor. Let me explain. It all has to do with changes which have taken place in the earth over millions of years. Many parts of the earth, which are now covered by great oceans, were once vast deserts. Other parts that are now great mountain ranges used to be swampy lowland. How did all that happen? Said Scout Fred. In all kinds of ways, said Actual Factual. You see, the center of the earth is a giant white-hot ball of melted rock. That causes pressure. Sometimes that pressure causes volcanoes, earthquakes, and pushes up great mountains. Suddenly, Scout Sister, who was a bit of a smarty, bent her knees and looked around the parking lot as if she were scared. Okay, Sister, said Brother. What's that about? I'm getting ready to jump out of the way, said Sister, in case some mountain pushes up through the parking lot. Her fellow scouts groaned, but the professor laughed. Anyways, he said, to make a long story short, my studies show that the low-lying lands where the giant prehistoric cave bear lived 9 million years ago are now none other than the Grizzly Mountain. As a matter of fact, I have pinpointed Table Rock Mountain. Therefore, we shall climb instead of dig. I can dig that, said Scout Sister. This time, the professor joined the others in a groan. And speaking of climbing, he said, it is time to start your climbing lessons. A distance away, high up in the tree, Ralph was watching the lessons through powerful field glasses. It was clear that the treasure had been overheard. It was clear that the treasure he had overheard the professor and the scouts talking about was hidden somewhere in the mountain. But where? The tree wasn't exactly an easy chair. Ralph had a crick in his neck and an ache in his back. and a cramp in his leg. He was about to climb down from the tree, but something happened that made Ralph forget about the crick, the ache, and the cramp. Actual Factual had stepped into the Berenstain a moment later. He came out with a folded up piece of paper. He unfolded it and placed it on the ground. It was the map. The Bear Scouts gathered round. Ralph tried hard to read it through the field glasses, but all he could make out was a big X, the X that marked the spot where the treasure was hidden. Ralph knew what he had to do. His plan called for a very dark night, some skeleton keys, and an after-closing tour of the Berenstain. Okay. Chapter 10. The Dark and Moonless Night. All was dark in Berenstain as Ralph came out of the bushes and tiptoed up to the front door. It was a dark and moonless night. Just the sort of night he had been waiting for. It hadn't come any too soon. Ralph had kept watch on the Bear Scouts' rock climbing lessons. Those pesky scouts took to rock climbing like ducks to water. It was pretty clear that Actual Factual and the Bear Scouts would be going after that treasure soon. Ralph was determined to beat them to it. He had learned quite a lot about rock climbing from watching them. I bet he did. Scouts practice on the small cliff behind the Berenstain. He got out his skeleton key. The third one worked. He slowly pulled the door open, hoping it wouldn't squeak. It didn't. Ralph had been to the Berenstain a few times and had an idea where the professor's office was. He was pretty sure that was where the map would be. The Berenstain, which was kind of spooky even in daylight, was very spooky at night, especially after closing. For somebody who had no business being there, Ralph peered into the darkness as he tiptoed through the museum's great halls. Even machines like old-fashioned steam engines and horseless carriages looked like monsters, and it was really scary, moving among the great dinosaur skeletons. But it was in the Hall of Fame, with its wax statues of famous bears of history, that Ralph got his worst scare. As he moved among the statues of Queen Elizabeth, Gondish Bear, and Black Bear, the pirate, a light suddenly flashed up ahead. It was the professor coming out of his office. He was coming right towards Ralph. Think fast. Mr. Ripoff, thought Ralph. He stepped up onto an extra stand and posed like a wax statue. He held his breath until Actual Factual was long past. Then he let it out with a whoosh. When he was sure it was safe, he stepped down from the stand and moved to the door of the office. He got out his skeleton key, but the door wasn't locked. He slipped in, closed the door, and put on the light. The map didn't take much finding. It lay right on Actual Factual's work table. The X that marked the spot almost jumped out at him. How foolish of the professor to leave a valuable treasure map out where anybody could find it. Even better, the spot marked X was none other than a certain cave on Table Rock Mountain. Quickly, Ralph made a copy of the map on the professor's copy machine. Table Rock Mountain was only a couple of miles from Beartown. Ralph knew it well. He scrambled up old Table Rock Mountain like it was a stepladder, grabbed that treasure, and no one in Bear County would be the wiser. But Mr. Ralph Ripoff would be much, much richer. Ralph was so pleased with himself that he gave himself a big hug. Chapter 11. The Big Climb. Actual Factual Science-mobile was bumping and grinding up the back road to Table Rock Mountain. Scout Brother was in the front seat with the professor, who was driving. Scout sister Fred and Lizzie were in the back seat, studying the professor's map of the mountain. The Science-mobile was a special van that the professor had fitted out for scientific work. There were picks and shovels for digging, snorkels for underwater study. A mini lab for doing tests, and a telescope was built into the roof of the roof for studying the sky. And of course, there was rock climbing gear for the big climb. Professor, said Scout Brother, I'm still not clear on why you're so sure you're going to find fossils of the prehistoric cave bear on Table Rock Mountain. I can't be sure, of course, said the professor, because there are no sure things in fossil hunting. But to answer your question, I'm very hopeful about the caves marked on the map, because I've been finding shell fossils up here. That's a pretty good point. Shell fossils in the mountains, said Scout Sister. That doesn't make sense. It does, said the professor. If you remember what we were talking about the other day, You mean about mountains pushing up out of oceans and stuff? Said Scout Lizzie. Exactly, said Actual Factual. And I didn't just find shell fossils, I've been finding fossils of ferns and water bugs, which prove that there weren't mountains millions of years ago. This was all low swamp, just the sort of place that was home to shellfish, water bugs, and giant prehistoric cave bears, said Scout Sister. Perhaps, said Actual Factual. Like, wow, said Scout Sister. Outstanding, said Scout Fred. Totally awesome, said Scout Lizzie. I have another question, said Scout Brother. Yes, said the Professor. Why did we take all these rock climbing lessons, said Scout Brother, if we're going to drive up Table Rock Mountain? You'll be climbing soon enough, said the Professor, pushing to a stop on the rocky ledge. When the scouts climbed out of the science mobile, they were startled to see they were already more than halfway to the top of the mountain. This is my secret backdoor route. Before I found it, I used to climb the front face of the mountain. It's a very hard climb. Look, shouted Scout Lizzie. We've got company. She pointed to some mountain goats on a narrow ledge across the way. We don't have company, said Actual Factual with a smile. They have company. Amazing animals. Been studying them for years. It's thanks to the mountain goat that we're up here. The Bear Scouts were already wearing their climbing harnesses. The Professor was snapping safety lines onto them. It was during my mountain goat study that I started finding these strange fossils. It was pure case of serendipity. Serenwoozy whipsity, said Scout Sister. Definition, please, Fred, said the Professor. Serendipity, said Fred. Pronounced serendipity. The finding of something of value by accident. You mean like if you're picking dandelions and you find a four-leaf clover? Correct, said the Professor. Now, here's our climbing plan. We are not going to climb directly to the cave, which is on the face of the mountain. We're going to climb to Table Rock. The scouts looked up at the strange rock formation called Table Rock. It was a little scary looking. The great flat rock was balanced on the mountain's sharp peak. Gee, Professor, said Scout Brother, it looks like it might tip over easily. No fear of that, said Actual Factual with a chuckle. It would take a lot more than 4 Bear Scouts and a skinny professor to tip that rock over. Been balanced up there for millions of years, and it'll stay up there for millions more. In any case, we'll climb to the top. We'll reach the cave. By lowering ourselves down the other side, the main cave is just below Table Rock. The Professor began driving spikes for the scouts to hook their safety lines to. He climbed higher and higher, driving spikes. Come on, fingers. Into the mountains he went. The scouts followed behind him. As they climbed, they shifted their safety lines to higher sets of spikes. What about you, Professor? Called Scout Brother. You don't have any safety lines. Don't need them, said the Professor. Forgive me for bragging, but I may just be the most expert rock climber in Bear County. He certainly seemed to be. He found footholds and handholds where there didn't seem to be any, and he climbed up the mountain, driving spikes as he went. He seemed as sure-footed as his friends, the mountain goat. So we're going to stop there on chapter 12. And I think, well, what did I say? 12, there's 18 chapters? Or 17? So we'll do that as the last part. So we'll do this in 3 parts. Okay? So we're going to leave off on chapter 12, which is oops. Remember, they're on the mountain, so I don't know that I ever want to hear the words oops. So everybody have a great night. And if tomorrow is your first day of school, or if I have missed it, I am so sorry. I hope you had a great day. But if tomorrow is your first day, I hope everybody has a wonderful day. It's all going to work out. I promise. I have to keep telling myself this. Everybody have a good night.